With her life crashing down around her, Linda tries to navigate her daughter's mysterious illness, her absent husband, a missing person, and an increasingly hostile relationship with her therapist. If I Had Legs, I Kick You is directed by Mary Bronstein and stars Rose Byrne, ASAP Rocky, Conan O'Brien, and many more. So Jeffrey, what do you think about If I Had Legs, I Kick You?
So this movie is written and directed by Mary Bronstein. The only other film I know of that she made is a film called Yeast, which is a part of Mumblecore when Mumblecore was first becoming like a renowned or well-known like film genre within the indie film community.
What is Mumblecore?
Mumblecore.
I do not know what this is.
This is what like the Duplass brothers became really famous for. So Mumblecore is kind of like a somewhat improvised, kind of funny, very flawed characters, usually interpersonal relationships. It goes for like a very realistic style. I'm trying to think of if you've seen any Mumblecore movies. I don't know if you have. But anyway, so she hasn't made a film in a very long time, and she returns with this film, which is not at all like a Mumblecore film, and is almost like an existentially terrifying horror film of being trapped inside someone's mind as they're dealing with life instances that we're all going to deal with at some point, like all colliding together with her at once. I would say that this film is tremendously effective. Your mileage may vary, whether that's something you actually enjoy or not, or maybe you just find yourself appreciating it. I thought that the way that it was effective was it's so successful at inducing anxiety within me and putting myself in this character's head that I thought that was a successful execution of the idea. Now, there are some things that we'll get into that I think that this film compromises by choosing that perspective. So I'm kind of wrestling with the idea of like, are the things that it sacrifices to devote itself to that perspective worth what it's giving us? And I think,
God, I had the same conversation in my head going on too.
yeah, and I would say tentatively yes. However, I think we also need to acknowledge like some of what this film chooses not to do and whether it's like okay to choose not to do those things in a film.
I completely agree with the sentiment, and I can't wait to get into more details about all those things. But I completely agree. This movie stressed me the out. This movie is so relentless in how consistent this anxiety and tension is from scene to scene. And like you said, I think that is a testament to Mary Bronstein's directing here. Her shot composition is so absolutely claustrophobic. We have our main character played by Rose Byrne here, Lydia, and every single camera shot is just right up in her face. Yeah. So as an actor, this is really beneficial for Rose Byrne here because she can't hide. Everything that she needs to get across, she has to do with absolute perfection. And I think, it's a very worthy performance. She absolutely crushes this overwhelming tension, this overwhelming anxiety. She portrays such a relentless angst that's both focused inward as well as projected outward on all the people around her. She is simply just drowning in this very impossible situation with her daughter with practically no support around her. And she can barely function with just normal daily tasks such as parking a car in a parking lot and not having that turn out to be a big thing. Mm-hmm. So she's just a character that's in extreme pain and going through this really big struggle.
Let's get into a little bit about the way that the film is like structured or the way that it uses its anxiety or its anxious effects on you. So the film makes the very purposeful decision to essentially structure everything like it's inside Rose Byrne's head. And this is an interpretation, but I think that it kind of has to be this way. I think that this is really the only way you can interpret the film in that regard, at least. As far as like what's going on in her life, there are scenes that are kind of fantastical. There's a lot of things going on with like the hole in her ceiling that maybe we'll talk a little bit about. Yeah. There's like a kind of a body horror scene towards the end of this that's unrealistic. And that gives me the impression that we're watching more how she feels than we're actually watching reality. So I think that when a person is talking to her, it's what she's hearing, not what they're saying.
Yeah.
And that's why the entirety of the world feels so combative towards her, because that's how she is so stressed out and she is so overwhelmed with all these things in her life that's how she's hearing everything. Again, that's a very willful decision, and I think it's a smart and interesting way to structure your film, because I can't really think of a lot of films like this. I can think of films that have certainly made me feel anxious, or you think of something like Uncut Gems, where it's like, oh, this is like an hour and 50-minute anxiety attack. I know of those films like that, but I have not seen that type of film done quite in this way. And I think that is like really commendable, even with some things that it sacrifices in the meantime.
There's so many nuances that the film builds into that. We could talk about her daughter, for example. The film makes this very conscious choice not to show her face.
Yeah.
All we hear is her voice, and there's constant nagging, there's constant bothering about wanting this hamster. I want to say that, like, yes, I don't think she's perceiving all these things as they accurately are happening realistically, but there's a level of truth to what is happening. Like, I think anybody who's a parent, I mean, we're uncles, we can relate to like the nagging quality of kids where they're just constantly bothering you and repeating themselves and then asking for the most ridiculous things and not taking any of your cares into consideration, obviously, because they're just kids. So it's understandable, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating for a parent to deal with.
Yeah, completely. And I also think that the point of view style is also reinformed by the way that it's shot. As you were saying in your opening, this film is like virtually all of it takes place on Rose Byrne's face. It's so focused on Rose Byrne, it gives you so little context of the rest of her life. Really does a good job of putting you in her head. It actually reminds me of, remember that movie Mother by Darren Aronofsky?
Yes, yeah.
The way that was shot, it spends so much time on Jennifer Lawrence's face that this was similar in a certain way.
I completely agree. Another aspect that I want to get into this film is just diving back into the narrative a little bit, because we haven't really talked too much about that. So Lydia is dealing with this situation with her daughter. She has a medical history. Something's going on with her. We're not really sure exactly what's going on. We do find out later in the film what is happening to some degree, but also the film chooses to remain vague in certain ways about this. We have Conan O'Brien in this role as her therapist. From this perspective of her conversations with him, you would not think he's a good therapist at all.
No.
Like, he seems so cold. He seems like he's not listening to anything he's saying. All of his responses are so muted.
I don't respond to my client's dream emails.
Yes. So he just like consistently comes across as so cold and irritated. And I think he pulls this off really well. I do really wonder like how much of this is truth and how much is just her perception of that. Like, she's not getting the emotion replicated back to her in the same way that she's putting out. So she immediately interprets it as like somebody being dishonest or disinterested.
Yeah, there's an impressionistic part of this, and I think a plausible interpretation of it is that she's at least somewhat of an unreliable narrator. I don't think we get a complete portrait of realism here.
I think there are two moments that I will describe of realism towards the end. I will get into that later on when we get to spoilers, but I completely agree with you. And that's not to minimize her experiences here. I think what she's going through is an extremely stressful situation. Stressful situations, as we were just talking about in our last review, can make people paranoid. They can make them crazy. They can make us think things that aren't really happening. They can make us feel things that aren't happening. And anxiety is like that a lot. The physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms, the way in which she has to cope. Like, she's constantly smoking and drinking.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like little details built into this film that do give us some type of hint into her experiences and how she's coping with them. It's obviously not well.
Yeah.
So getting into that a little bit, I want to continue on this character journey that we've been going on and going to ASAP Rocky's character, because I feel like we kind of been spoiled this year with him with Best and Highest to Lowest. I think it's showing him for being a really great actor.
Totally.
I didn't know he had this much range. As we saw him in Highest to Lowest, he was filled with so much entitlement, anger, and this larger-than-life attitude, and his role here could not be more different. He is quietly reflective, he's endearing, he is very perceptive, he empathizes with her, and he's one of the few people in the film that almost seems like she is being responded to more realistically.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, he seems like the most real person in this film. He helps with his ID when the lady at the motel won't give her the wine. And she's like, well, I've been down here like how many times? You know I'm of age. There's another time, even though she rejects him, he comes outside to her while she's out smoking and drinking some wine and tries to like make some conversation. I find it interesting because he does seem to be the most like heartwarming person that we get to see.
Yeah, I was wrestling with what his intention is, or not his intention as a character, but what the writer-director's intention was in including him. He's both a gateway to some of the more like nefarious things that she wants to do because she is willing to like get drugs with him, but at the same time, he has boundaries and he has an understanding of why he's seeking those things, and I'm not totally sure that she does. So he's there essentially to be a foil for her, and I think bring this sense of calm.
We could continue our character journey with Christian Slater, who plays Lydia's husband. And Linda, I keep saying Lydia. I think I said Lydia like multiple times. Linda, my apologies. Again, we get this perspective of where we just hear his voice. We don't see him because he's on some kind of work trip. So all we get are these phone calls. And for a husband, he could not seem more disconnected, more cold, more antagonizing.
Yeah, I was going to say very blamey.
Yeah, very blamey. And I am trying to figure out, is this partially true or is it not true? Every single phone call seems like he's just another nagging child that is just complaining about things as he's off gallivanting, and she's upset because of that. I mean, somewhat rightfully so. She's going to be jealous and envious of that.
Yeah, of course. And honestly, when you're on a work trip, they're like usually built into the whole thing is like you going out to dinner with people.
Yeah.
But that can look like very acrimonious from, across the pond or wherever she is, that he's out having this great time on this work trip while she's like holding down the fort all the time.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things I found is about her experience as a mother tied to the mothers that we get to see around her. She's also a therapist, by the way, and she is having a session with this other new mother who seems to be struggling just as much as she is.
Yeah.
But what's so interesting is in these scenes, just the way that she expects everybody else to be warmer to her, she doesn't really give it to this person at all.
Yeah, I think that there's an element of, and I'm not saying this is entirely justifiable or not, but there's an element of her life is so overwhelming that she has nothing to give.
Yes, yeah.
But maybe that could lead to her giving some more credence to the people around her because that obviously they're going through the same things that she would be going through. So that would alleviate some of like the reactions to some of their actions.
We are going to spoilers. If you have not seen If I Had Legs, I Kick You, now is the time to leave. Otherwise, we are going to spoilers. Wee-oo. As I was just saying a few moments ago, we have this moment that kind of like brings this film together in one line that she says. And I think it's something along the lines of, I'm not meant to be a mother.
This is in the therapist's office, right?
Yes.
She has kind of a breakdown about like, am I just one of those people who wasn't supposed to be a mother and now I'm trapped in this?
Yes. Thank you for putting that better than I did. But yeah, that seems to be, I think, the thesis of the movie is that she is this particular person who came into motherhood and just doesn't feel like she was meant for this.
I also feel like that's a lot of mothers in our lives have said these same things to us.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know that she's unique in that way, and I'm not trying to like diminish her issues at all as a character, but I think that that's a really common way to feel when you're struggling as a mother.
Yeah. There's another part attached to that a little bit later on where she's at this group therapy session at the hospital or clinic that they're going to with her daughter. Mm-hmm. And it has all the mothers in a room. And I find this scene very interesting because it's a time in which we see how the other mothers are sitting in the space.
Yeah.
Compared to her, this doctor is consistently telling them all, like, this is not your fault. Like, you are not to blame. She gets up furious and she's like, we are to blame. Like, this is my child. Like, I'm to blame. This is my fault.
Yeah, I think she's unwilling to exonerate herself in a certain way. And I think this very typical of motherhood is that even though something with your child is out of your control, you still feel like it's your responsibility. Yeah. So I think that that's what that scene is about. It actually ties really interestingly into the end of the film, which I don't know if you want to go there now or you want to wait a little bit, but this is the scene I'm thinking about when I'm interpreting the very last line of the movie.
Okay, we'll get to that then.
Okay.
But going from here, during one of these sequences at this clinic, we slowly start to fit the pieces of what's happening with her daughter. There are nutrient bags that she has to put in her system every night, so she's constantly monitoring, kind of like an IV type thing in the room. But her daughter is able to move around because we see her in the car. We don't see her, but we hear her in the car. They're going out to eat. So it's not like she's completely immobile.
No, it's something that's, I think, almost like an IV. It's not an IV, but it's something that like she can put on her daughter when her daughter is sleeping that gives her the nutrition that apparently her diet is lacking. It's not totally specified whether this is like an eating disorder or whether this is something that she can't control, like a virus or disease within her.
Yeah.
There's like a variety of interpretations there, but we do see scenes where she seems unwilling to eat.
Yeah.
Where Rose Byrne's character is constantly bothering her, like, hey, how about you eat another piece of bacon? How about you eat a little more of this? Yeah. There's definitely something going on like with nutrition and willingness to eat.
This whole thing turns into a bigger thing because during this one of these conversations where the doctor is saying, like, if she doesn't make her weight, we are going to take her out of this program. During this conversation, she tells her, like, oh, it's not a big deal to take this tube out that's in her stomach. You know, the doctor just pulls it out. And so we get this absolutely,
Do you want to hear it again? Do you
No.
wanna hear the noise?
Well, that's the thing is I only heard this scene because when it started happening, I couldn't look at it anymore. But the length at which the scene occurred and the sounds in which I heard, I could only tell that it was kind of fantastical how much of tube came out of
completely.
the
It
daughter's
was
belly.
like a jump rope.
Yes.
It was like as long as a jump rope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in some way it's probably a very overwhelming experience to have to pull a tube out of your daughter's stomach.
So again, you feel like it's going on forever, and that's what the film is showing us, even though it's like biologically impossible that it would go on as long as it did.
But I think that's a metaphor for how traumatic the event is for her.
Yeah, of course.
As a mother.
Yeah.
This is, I think, where we get to the interesting stuff because we finally get to the end of the film and the father comes home. So when the father gets home, I find it very interesting that his voice sounds different. The way he's speaking to her sounds a little different. And it only has like, Christian Slater only shows up and has like 2 lines face value at the camera, but he sounds like a different person.
I didn't notice that. I completely believe you, but I think that aids more in the interpretation of the film.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was saying that a lot of these things are coming from her perspective, that maybe she was thinking more harshly of him than he was actually being, and same with a lot of these other characters, I think this is a clue because he sounds like sweeter. And part of me was like, oh, is it because his daughter's right there in the room? So is he playing it up? But at the same time, it's just like it's a very specific nuance in the tone of his voice and how different it is.
I have to look for that when I watch this film again.
And so another thing that happened, well, like during this whole thing, she gets overwhelmed and she starts running to the beach and she starts crashing herself into the waves over and over and over and over. She comes back onto the beach and then all of a sudden her daughter comes over and that's when we get to see her face for the very first time. But again, it's very nuanced and easy to miss, but the tone of her own daughter's voice sounds different. This whole movie, I actually kind of felt disconnected from the daughter. The tone of her voice seemed a little like off-putting or more harsh than it would actually be for a child. Seemed more nagging than a child, just slightly. Yeah. All of this made me feel like maybe there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. This is a very depressing film, and I don't know if it has any answers at the end. But if there's anything that I could see as optimistic about the end of the film, is that the tones of these voices, most particularly with her husband and her daughter, sound more normal. Or sound more warming.
That was the question I was going to ask you is the ending hopeful or not? And of course, when you give a binary like that, the answer is kind of both, right? Or it can be interpreted in different ways. And I first read the ending as like overwhelmingly cynical. And the reason that I read that was because she says, I'll be better.
Yes.
And I thought that was not growth because she continues to take unnecessary responsibility on everything all the time without giving herself even just like a little bit of levity to be able to get through this. Like she's continuing to take on the weight of everything in her life. So I read it so overwhelmingly cynically and I was like, oh gosh. And then I started thinking about it and I started thinking about, I didn't catch the whole tone of voice thing that you were talking about, but I was like, the director does choose to show us her daughter's face for a reason. She could have remained faceless or just a shouting voice outside of the frame for the entire film, but she chose to show her for a reason, and I think that reason may be some sort of resigned humanity that the film is willing to show us in its final moments. So I could really go either way with it, or it could be, again, a mix of both.
I think it's a mix of both, yeah.
It could be that she's finally seeing the humanity in her daughter, but then that just makes her want to take further responsibility, which is a scary thing, because I can't imagine if there was a sequel to this film, well, she takes more responsibility. Like, that's not going to look good.
We're not parents, but we know a lot of parents and we're uncles. And honestly, parenthood is scary. It looks scary.
It's really scary and it looks very difficult.
Yeah.
And it is patience testing at every single second of the day.
Even though this movie ends, and if there might be even some hope to it, I think a lot of these things can still linger and they'll still keep going on for your entirety as a parent. I mean, it's just never ending, I think.
I changed jobs recently and I was talking to my mom about it and she was like, oh, I'm so glad that you got a new job and that it's going well, because because when you were changing jobs, I was having like panic attacks every night. And I was just like, why? But that's just what moms do. Like they feel a responsibility to your well-being, even though like I'm in my mid-30s. Like it's still going on.
Yeah.
So
here's to the moms.
Here's to the moms. This movie's for you, but it won't make you feel good. It will make you feel understood, but it won't make you feel good.
So you ready to go to grades?
Yes, I'm going to give this a B+. I'm not sure I'm ever going to watch this film again, aside from maybe when it's on like HBO Max someday. I might go back just to look at like the tone of voice that you're saying, because I think that's a really interesting catch. Separated from how much I like enjoyed myself or how much I may want to watch this again, I think that there's a monumental amount of craft here. And again, we could like quibble with, hey, because you took an impressionistic perspective, then that means some of your characters become caricatures and we don't really get to learn a lot about them. I think that's a fair thing to say. But at the same time, her goal of creating an extremely anxiety-inducing experience that is like emblematic of how many people feel about motherhood, I think that she was really, really successful. So I think that this is a very good film. I think Rose Byrne is like outrageously good in this film. And it's completely worth seeing.
Yeah, I really agree. I give the film a B. I enjoyed it for all the same reasons, but I also didn't enjoy it for a lot of the same reasons. So it was just very overwhelming experience. I will probably never watch this again, but I give so much credit to Rose Byrne in this role. She did an absolute fantastic job with it. I agree with the impressionistic aspects. It seems like Mary Bronstein really put herself in a box with this film, specifically so. And I think depending on who the viewer is, you might feel engaged with the film or you might feel completely disengaged with the film. So I don't know. That choice could have its up or down for you as a viewer. But as for me, I found a lot to appreciate it, but I also never want to see it again because it was just so overwhelming and so anxiety and panic inducing.
I will say I was listening to a podcast and a woman on the podcast said that the most that she felt identified with this entire year in movies was when Rose Byrne was shoving like an entire piece of pizza in her mouth.
Oh my God, the cheese.
Just to eat something quickly before she has to parent more.
Yeah.
So yeah, this movie did something.
All right, and that's it for our review. If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Let us know in the comments. What did you think about this movie? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.